I want to hear cannons. Three-step drop, goes on the end zone. On ball, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans reaches up with one hand and grabs it in. Here they go again, tempo mode, dropping to throw. Winston out, got those to the left. It's intercepted at the 35. Outside the numbers to the 40, to the 35, to the 30, to the 25, to the 20, to the 15, 10. Mike Edwards, touchdown Tampa Bay. That's the dagger, my friend.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I am your host, as always, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me today, my good buddy and co-host for this episode, from BucsNation.com, Mr. James Hill. Joining us today, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback and the pride of Tulane. How about the wave? Mr. Shaun King joins the show. How are we feeling, fellas? Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday, man. Hell, Tulane won a New Year's Day bowl game. Bucs won the NFC South. I mean, what could be better?
Yeah, no kidding. Listen, I don't do this a lot. We are live today on Friday on YouTube, and this isn't something we normally do, but it has been one hell of a week. It is Friday. Sean's got the cigar. I'm going to go ahead and crack open a cold one.
I like it.
And we're going to get this bitch underway. So, the last time we talked about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they were fresh off a division victory over the Carolina Panthers. They secured the NFC South, a division that nobody wanted to win this year, but the Bucs were able to get the dirty work done. So they have got their ticket punched to the playoffs. They've got one more division opponent as we wrap up the 2022 NFL regular season. They are going to be on the road playing the Atlanta Falcons. Now, obviously, this is a game that, in the grand scheme of things, is not going to be very incremental for Tampa Bay. The injury report came out. A lot of big names going to be resting up this week. We'll talk about that here shortly. But, let me ask you this, Sean. What do the Bucs have to play for this week? There's been a couple sound bites that came out. Chris Godwin in particular said one of the most important things about the game this week is for all of these starters to come together and find a way to play 60 minutes, because I know the Bucs are 8-8 and they won the division, but something we've said all year long is that it feels like we haven't seen this Bucs team come together and play a full 60 minutes of football like we know that they're capable of. And after last week, you got to think they want to keep the ball rolling offensively, start playing their best ball right before the postseason. So realistically, for anyone wondering, what are the Bucs playing for this week?
I think it's about confidence. First of all, internally, like, they have a very good grasp from a health standpoint. And if you have guys that have been battling through who aren't even close to 100%, I think the most important thing for them is to be as healthy as possible for Dallas. In the same breath, I would treat it like a preseason game. Hey, listen, guys, we're going to go out. The starters that are available, we're going to play the first couple of series. Let's go out and execute and build some confidence and take some momentum into, this wild card game against a Dallas team we've already beaten, but a Dallas team that's better than they were when we played them. I think it was first game of the season. So that would be my approach, business as usual, but also understanding that we do have some guys that we're going to need to be at full strength, because the playoffs isn't just the Dallas game. It's a 4-game stretch we have to go on in order to hoist the Lombardi Trophy.
Yeah, I think too, exactly what you said there, Sean, is like kind of treating it like a preseason game, because with those starters, like you said, and, to Rhett's point, so many guys are battling with injuries. A lot of players are ruled out, so you don't want to run that risk of aggravating injuries. A lot of guys, even Tristan Wirfs, I believe, re-aggravated his ankle injury a week or two ago. So do you want to run that risk? With Chris Godwin saying, hey, we got to put together a full 60 minutes. Do you want him out there for the full game? That's a pretty legitimate concern there, so close to the playoffs with just 1 week away from that. So I definitely agree where they can build some momentum, get a couple of series, I believe Todd Bowles said they still have a lot of things they need to work on. Definitely agree with that, but also finding that balance of, okay, build some momentum for yourself as a team, but let's take you out so you don't possibly run the risk of getting hurt. That's where you got to find that balance.
Yeah, and one of the discussions at the beginning of the week as far as who's going to be available and who's not was just how many of the starters are we going to see, right? Obviously, you want to go out and win this game, and I think the Bucs and maybe Todd Bowles in particular have a little extra to play for this week. Maybe Tom Brady has this on his mind. I know not a lot of people probably care because, like I said at the start of the show, it seems so so non-important at this point in the season since you are gearing up for the postseason. But I think not only do you want to finish up the regular season with a win, but you want to finish with a positive record. If you're Todd Bowles and you can hang your hat on a division title and 9 wins in a season, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I know the expectations were lofty, but 9 wins in a season is still somewhat respectable, I think, especially for a first-year head coach, right? Todd Bowles has had this defense humming. Some of those guys are resting up. The offense still kind of trying to find their footing, and hopefully they can do that this week against Atlanta. But I think obviously they're going to want to come out here with a positive record at the end of the year. It's going to boost everybody's confidence going into the postseason. But Tom Brady, here's a question I wanted to ask. No question Tom Brady's going to start this game, but is he going to finish it? You brought up the idea that it is kind of like a preseason game where you want to try and conserve these guys' energy for the more important games. And if we're entering the third quarter, I mean, hell, if we're entering the fourth quarter of this game and the Bucs are ahead by 3 points, let's say it's 24-21, is it still going to be worth pulling Tom Brady to throw in a Blaine Gabbert or potentially a Kyle Trask later in the game? Like, do you think those guys are going to want to stay in if this game is close down the stretch? Because, some of the wins the Bucs have this year, they had to kind of play catch up in the fourth quarter. And if you're in a situation where you have to do that on Sunday, I can't imagine the merit that's going to be, that you're going to get from taking some of those guys out. Putting in a Blaine Gabbert when you have to really kind of put the game away at some point doesn't seem like the best move to come away with a win. And I know that the win in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter, but if this game is close in the fourth quarter, are we going to see the starters play the whole thing?
I think when you look at the year in a vacuum, the process has looked flawed. The result has been all that mattered. A lot of times we've come on, Rhett, and we've talked about with Evan, the majority of the year, they've had to come back down 16-6 to a Cardinals team with Trace McSorley. They were losing the Panthers game. But I told you guys it didn't matter because ultimately, if they won the division, they'd be in the playoffs. To me, the inverse is true for this game. I'd like the starters that are available to come out. If they can play a great first quarter, then take them out the game. Because ultimately, as much as Todd would like to go 9-8, if you go 9-8 and lose to the Cowboys, it doesn't mean anything. If you go 8-9 and win the Super Bowl, guess what? Nobody remembers what happened second half of meaningless Week 18 versus the Atlanta Falcons. So I would put a lot of emphasis on my guys. Let's be sharp from the get-go. That's something we haven't done often this year. It'd be great to get 2 good drives in the first where there's some balance. As successful as Tom was, it was great to see Mike Evans and the vertical passing game kind of reemerge. We still were terrible running the ball. I think our leading rusher at 28 yards. So if we can get a couple of drives in the first where there's some balance there, Fournette breaks a run, Rashad White breaks a run, we get us an explosive play in the passing game, then I'd be more than okay with them now coming out of the game and letting some of the young guys get some playing time, some experience, because you never know. It's always next man up mentality, and you're always, one play away from having that guy that's the backup now being somebody to depend on as a starter.
Hey, and speaking of backups as well, the left tackle stepping in this week, more than likely going to be Brandon Walton as Donovan Smith has been ruled out. Last week against Carolina, one of the reasons Tom Brady was so confident throwing the rock around the yard is because it felt like that offensive line finally started to hold up a little bit more, or at least in Tom's eyes, he started to trust them a little bit more. Now with D. Smith, I know that he has been under heavy scrutiny so far this year, so not a lot of people are going to be super upset that he's not out there, but he is a starting caliber left tackle in the NFL, so I think his presence will certainly be felt, or his lack of presence, if you will. James, I didn't mean to step on top of you right there, but what are your thoughts coming into this one?
Yeah, just to kind of talk more about what Shaun was saying. You know, you mentioned Rhett, where if it's a 24-21 situation in the fourth quarter, do you leave the starters out there? Well, I still think the starters would play probably the first quarter, like what Shaun was saying, even if that, maybe a series or two, again, kind of like a preseason game. But one thing I'd be interested to see, you mentioned it, Rhett, is if it's 24-21, Bucs are up and they need to put a game away, or if they're even down 24-21, give a moment like that to a young quarterback like Kyle Trask, who, the Bucs have not seen a lot of besides preseason games and some training camps and whatnot. Give him a moment like that, see what, your young guys can do as backups. Like Shaun said, you don't know what can happen and you don't know what kind of quality backups you may need in the future. So a lot of young guys, a lot of backups getting those types of reps so you get a better idea of what your depth looks like, what your young developmental guys look like, I think is very huge for a game like this, to have an opportunity to see what you can have with those players. So that, I think, would be a very good thing to see. Maybe, oh, we're down. We need a game-winning drive. Let's see what Kyle Trask has. Because right now, as it stands, he's the only quarterback under contract after this year. And that's a pretty legitimate question as to what's going to happen at the quarterback position. So I feel like even if they are down, and the starters are already out, you're obviously not going to put them back in. But it is a good thing to see with what you have in your depth, what you have in your young developmental guys, and it can help some of those off-season decisions that you may need to make later on down the line.
We talk about the offensive side of the ball coming into this one. Of course, Donovan Smith being ruled out, so that's going to be affecting the offensive line. Tom Brady maybe feeling the pressure in the pocket, not going to be as comfortable as he was this time a week ago, throwing it to win the FedEx Air Player of the Week, I think. He ended up bringing home the hardware. Mike Evans, obviously, his 3-touchdown, 200-yard performance enough to win NFC Player of the Week honors. Congrats to both of those guys. But I think those are the only two pieces on the offensive side of the ball. Donovan Smith, and I think that's it. I don't think they've ruled anyone else out. So we should see most of the starters to kick this thing off. But let me ask you about Kyle Trask really quick. You brought that up. The $1 million question this week is, are we going to finally see Kyle Trask, who, again, the Bucs spent a second-round pick the year after the Super Bowl on Kyle Trask. Haven't seen a lot of regular season action. Saw him in the preseason. I think we saw some ample improvement between his first preseason and his second preseason. But let me ask you this, Shaun. Do you have any opinions on Kyle Trask? And, what are your expectations for him if he does get into the game on Sunday?
Well, I think the onus is on Kyle Trask to prove that, he's a building block moving forward. The fact that you don't hear a lot of buzz about Kyle Trask, I think, says that he has not been overwhelming in his time in practice. If he was just lighting it up, whether it be scout team, whether it be limited reps, then you'd hear some buzz. Because, of course, there's a lot of national buzz that, this is Tom's last year in a Buccaneer uniform. And if he decides to play next year, it'll most likely be somewhere on the West Coast, whether that be the Raiders or the 49ers. That's the buzz that you hear. And if you're watching, don't get mad at me. I'm just a news anchor. All I'm doing is reporting the news. So I think if Kyle gets the opportunity, it's a big opportunity for him. If Blaine Gabbert gets it, it's a big opportunity for him because you're basically auditioning. I remember a few years back, Matt Flynn got a multi-year big money deal because of how he played in the final regular season game for Green Bay. So you look at the Raiders, Jarrett Stidham went out through for 300 plus and 3 touchdowns versus what a lot of people think is the best defense in football in the 49ers. So these are opportunities. Anytime you get to add to your resume as a player that doesn't get a lot of opportunities, it's really, really important. For Kyle, if he gets a chance to play, he's got to be efficient. Can't do things that you're not, predisposed to do. He's not going to run around and be Josh Allen. He just has to make his layups. And by that, I mean, when guys are open, the pocket is clean, hit those throws, be smart, in situations that become chaotic, meaning if it's 3rd and 6 and the receiver doesn't get a release, don't force a ball that's high and tipped and turns into an interception. It's okay to check it down. It's okay to punt, just show that you can handle, operating an offense because this free agent class is coming up this offseason going to have some big names, guys. I mean, you're talking Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, Gardner Minshew, Cooper Rush. Like, there's some guys that are going to be available. So the Bucs will have some options to choose from come this offseason. So if I'm Kyle, I understand that, and I need to make sure that, when they have their end of the year meetings, whenever that is, and my name comes up, like, I put my best foot forward, if given an opportunity.
I think for the Kyle Trask supporters out there, this is going to be an exciting opportunity as well if he does find himself ready to go for Sunday's game. This is the first time we've seen him throw into some playmakers. You know what I mean? Can't guarantee Mike Evans, Chris Godwin's still going to be in the game if Kyle Trask does come in, but you have to assume guys like Russell Gage still going to be getting some reps on the offense.
I was going to say,
Scotty Miller.
Right. The Bucs have the deepest wide receiver group in the league.
Yeah.
Like, they at the top end, like, they don't have necessarily a Justin Jefferson or Devontae Adams, but I mean, from top to bottom, I mean, that's the best group in the National Football League.
It's a much
weak spot. Yeah,
it's a much different group than who he was throwing to in the preseason. You know what I mean? Like, part of the reason I think Kyle Trask's preseason has been so underwhelming is because he's been throwing to practice squad guys. No.
No, Rhett, no. He's not playing against Aaron Donald either now.
No, he's not. You're right. You're right.
I mean,
he's going to be
the apples comparison. And listen, here's what I learned when you're a quarterback. The part you can control, if it looks right, nobody cares what the result is. Like, if you get in the preseason and you're throwing dimes and the guys are dropping them, nobody's going to blame you if you end up 6 for 20. But if you're in the preseason and you're 6 for 20 and, you look uneasy in the pocket, you look like the pass rush bothers you, you got a guy open downfield, you throw it out of bounds, like, no excuses, no explanations. Now, the onus is on you to make the presentation look right, because you know what it looks like when you see it.
Right. No, I get you. And I think, honestly, the expectations are going to be all over the place, because when you start to go through the backup quarterbacks the Bucs have on the roster, Blaine Gabbert, been in the league long enough to where you know what he is. He's been a starter before. He might not go out there and throw 4 or 5 touchdowns to win you the game, but he also could throw potentially a pick 6 to lose you the game. So with Blaine Gabbert, I feel like there is a risk-reward factor there. We know what he is. You know what I'm saying? I don't think there's a lot of untapped potential as far as Blaine Gabbert as a starter in the NFL. But again, circling back to Kyle Trask, just the group that he's going to be playing around, the opportunity that he'll have in front of him. Obviously, the dog, a big supporter of Kyle Trask. He's excited to see him get some action this week. I think that's what's honestly exciting a lot of people, is that, if he goes out there and honestly, he doesn't even have to ball out. Like you said, he's just got to be serviceable. He's got to prove that he can make those throws to an open receiver. He can convert a 3rd and 6 by finding the check down and moving the chain. Stuff like that is going to give people a lot of hope for the future, and maybe shake some things up for a potential quarterback competition in the spring. Just like you said, a pretty good list of free agent quarterbacks. I think the Bucs might want to take a look at that. But let's talk about the other side of the football here coming into this game. We had mentioned some guys who are not going to be playing, and the list is pretty lengthy, but obviously the reasons are obvious. Carlton Davis will not be playing. Outside linebacker Carl Nassib not going to be available. Safety Logan Ryan with a knee injury will not be playing. Donovan Smith, we mentioned, already ruled out. Vita Vea also not going to be playing. Jamel Dean listed as questionable. So I wanted to bring up this defensive line really quickly, because in the absence of Shaq Barrett, the absence of Carl Nassib, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has had an increased role. Obviously, he's not as well-rounded of an edge rusher as you would like him to be yet, but I think that's going to come with time. Outside linebackers, defensive ends in the NFL, seems like they take a little longer to develop into what they truly can be. For the longest time, the Bucs were trying to make Wolk Olson a stand-up 4-3 defensive end, and once they changed the scheme, he put on some weight and kicked it over to the inside. His career just got much better. But a guy that's been making some noise, and a guy that I think we've been waiting on to make some noise, is big number 98, Anthony Nelson. He has had one hell of an underrated year, I think. 6 sacks on the year, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the last 3 weeks, he has played every single defensive snap. I'm excited to see what Anthony Nelson can do this week. And I think a lot of Bucs fans who have been looking for potential reinforcements in that pass rush are excited to see what he can do as well. He's made some great plays this year, and hopefully he can make some more.
Well, it's a great opportunity for him. You're going against Desmond Ridder. I mean, in 3 games, he's got 85 pass attempts, been sacked 7 times, has not thrown a touchdown or interception. So, I mean, the good thing is, the ball's probably not coming out quick all the time, so you'll have a chance to get some sacks. If you're in the secondary, you got to feel like, and, I think it's been unfortunate that we've had to battle injuries on defense, but I feel like the depth on defense has gotten a lot of reps this year, out of necessity. So, this won't be like a Kyle Trask situation. A guy that hadn't really taken a snap is all of a sudden, in a live game. Most of our guys on the roster on defense have seen significant action. So, it's a great opportunity against a young quarterback on the other team, to try and go force him into some mistakes. So, listen, that league is a tough league, so those guys know every time you get on that grass, it's an opportunity to get closer to the bag. And so when a backup gets in, he's going to be doing his best to make plays. The big thing for me is how fundamentally sound are the guys that are going to play on defense. That's what I'm looking at. I watched the game from a different prism. It's just my life experience as a player and a coach. So I'm looking at run fits. I think when the defense has gotten hurt this year, the run fits have been off. Contained guys aren't forcing the ball back in. Spill guys, they aren't spilling the ball to the contain. The guy that's fitting, he's in the wrong gap, or he's overrunning it. So, those are the things I'm going to be looking at. Are they tracking the inside hip and the sideline? Is an extra defender? Like all those little things, and I'm sure Coach Bowles, that's what he wants to see. Can we depend on you to do your job? Like, I don't know if everybody looks at defense, from this vantage point, but, when it comes to defending the run, everybody's responsible for a gap in a one-gap scheme defense. And, if everybody does their job, then the run, should be minimized. And, that's what you want to be able to do. When you're scheming an opponent and that they're a gap scheme team and you're trying to, knock those pullers off their path, when you're the backside guy, you're going to get some zone read with Desmond Ridder. When you're the pull guy or when you're the guy that has the ball carrier, can you just do your job? That's the things you're looking for in this game. Who's going to be able to handle their responsibility, in a live situation.
Yeah, and to that point, Shaun, the Bucs have a lot of starting guys out. Carlton Davis being out. I imagine Jamel Dean probably isn't going to play that much. Mike Edwards has been dealing with hamstring hip injuries, so you're going to be seeing a lot of backups, right? A lot of guys who are going to be a part of that rotation in those playoff games who do need to improve on those certain types of things. Vita Vea not being out there. Like you said, if a guy like Vita Vea is out, big difference in terms of what this defense can do in certain situations, run game responsibilities and whatnot specifically. So whenever you hear Coach Bowles say something along the lines of, we still have a lot of things that need to be worked on, that's one of those things that you want to see. How are those backups going to do? Are those rotational guys going to do whenever you don't have a big guy like Vita Vea who's able to help in that run defense? Are they going to be able to work on those assignments better and get more in sync with what they need to do on the defensive side? That's going to be where you're going to see a lot of those valuable reps for guys like Anthony Nelson and some of those safeties as well, like a Keanu Neal. Zion McCollum might play a lot of cornerback in this game, the 5th round pick that they took in this most recent draft. Raheem Nunez Roches, Pat O'Connor, some of these guys who have been getting a lot of reps, like you said, Shaun, due to injuries or just due to, the normal rotation that they have on the defense. Now we can see the chance of, okay, can they build some momentum for themselves? Can they build some continuity in terms of handling their assignments and doing what they need to do? Because you never know what can happen. Vita Vea, he's missed a lot of time with that calf injury. If he's on a snap count in the playoffs, or he may miss the game entirely in the worst case scenario, those guys are going to have to step up. They're going to have to, take over those assignments that Vita Vea may have and, handle their own assignments as well. So that's going to be some valuable reps, like you said, that they're going to be getting in this game because of all those defensive guys being out.
And James, some of it's, just simple. When you're watching this game, you're talking about Anthony Nelson on 3rd and 3 on the hard count. Does he jump off sides?
Right.
The nickelback you were talking about, when you're bracketing 2 and you have inside help and it's 3rd and 4, you shouldn't give up any outbreaking routes. Like, it's just like those simple things that sometimes go unnoticed, as you're watching the game. Those are the things that Coach Bowles is looking for. Because if we got to put you in the game in the playoffs, can we trust you? not to
Right.
make unforced errors, to be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. We shouldn't have to coach effort. Is everybody running to the ball? Like,
Right.
those are the things in a game like this that you're looking for, because that starts to talk about culture. Like, we fought through a lot of adversity this year. We've had a lot of spotlight. We hadn't always shown our best, in our primetime games, but has that helped us mature to where we're at now so that, we can make this run? And I'll say this, I just put a bet in for the Bucs to win the Super Bowl, 20-1. So, and I just want to put some context on it. I bet them to win the NFC. I got 10-1. You always can shop around. But here was my thought process. Jalen Hurts going to be coming off an extended period of time out. So there's probably going to be some rust there. We've already beaten Dallas. Now, they're better, but nobody thinks we can't beat Dallas. Minnesota, great record. You look at their point differential, they're not as good as their record says.
And even just the way they've fallen apart at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Dropping games.
Whether it's Green Bay, Seattle, Detroit, San Francisco, yeah, okay, they're a formidable team. I've said this time and time again. Brock Purdy has a turnover-filled game coming. You start to see glimpses of it against the Raiders. He missed some throws that he had been making. Like, there's one coming. Like, you just don't come into the league and run off 10 straight and, play mistake-free, efficient football. He's got a mistake-filled game coming. So I'm just saying the Bucs are live when you look at the NFC.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. As far as Brock Purdy goes, I think he's due for one. Not only because he got a one-up on Tampa Bay already, but, the question is, at the end of the day, Brock Purdy's been playing well for the system that San Fran has, but he is an untested rookie. He is a guy that when the lights come on in the postseason, everything's hunky-dory right now, but 49er fans aren't going to be too high on him when he has a 0-touchdown, 3-pick game under the lights in the postseason. So,
well, they're going home. All that bang Niner gang,
right?
And don't forget this now, he's their third quarterback.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they
no
can't
kidding.
afford to have any kind of sprained ankle, any situation where, he hits his hand on a helmet or something. So they're in a very precarious situation at that position. So, and I don't wish that on any of them. I hope he plays lights out and we're just too good on that particular day. But that's where my faith in Tampa comes. Like, when these playoffs start, if we were in the AFC, I really would just say #no shot. Like, there's no shot that we're going to beat Burrow, Mahomes, Allen. It just wasn't going to happen. Not with the way we're playing this year. But in the NFC, when you look at the quarterbacks that Brady would have to beat, he is by far the most accomplished one. We've proven we can beat Rodgers, twice. What is it, last 2 years? No, not last 2 out of the last 3. We've knocked out Green Bay. Come on. So that gives me hope. It really does, that in spite of all the frustration throughout the year, I still feel like, in my mind, the Bucs have the least amount of questions from a resume standpoint, as anybody in the NFC.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to look at a disappointing regular season and equate that to maybe a one-and-done run in the playoffs. But just like you said, half of the season is getting to the dance. And as far as the outside looking in for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, from a resume perspective, you've got a defense, you've got a core, you've got a competent defense, you've got a great head coach to run the defense in Todd Bowles. Like, people don't give this defense enough credit for the way that they have played in the 2022 season. And obviously, because the offense playing the way that they did, that was a talking point all year. But when you come into the playoffs and you have a competent defense and you have got Tom Brady under center, obviously, I think you have just got the same chance that you do. And we also talked about the presence of Akeem Hicks and Vita Vea. Oddly enough, there's a stat for this. In 2022, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 5-1 when Vita Vea and Akeem Hicks are available and both play 10-plus snaps. So the absence of Vita Vea could obviously do a lot for this defense. Shaun King, I know you got to run here in a minute. Before you go, let me get a score prediction for this Sunday.
I'm going to give a halftime score. I'm going to say Bucs up 14-3 at the half. That'd be really, really, a good outcome in my opinion. And whatever happens in the second half, man, listen, some young guys getting some experience. So, hopefully Brady and the crew will come out, be efficient. I'll say this about a team like Atlanta. They've kind of scratched and clawed the entire season, but the vets on that team, the majority of them, listen, they got flights booked, Cabo, Hawaii. Like, listen, they want this game to be over quick as possible. So hopefully the Bucs go and get it done, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback Shaun King. Thanks for joining us for the first half of the show. We're going to wrap this thing up, but we'll take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Live on YouTube. We'll talk to you here in a minute. Welcome back to the Cannon Fire Podcast, live right here on YouTube today. Pleasure to be joined by not only everyone watching, but my good buddy and colleague, James Hill, a.k.a. Mr. Bucs Nation. Man. It is, listen. I know we're talking about Tampa Bay, obviously, but I do want to take a recess here. 2023 has not been fun so far, man. It really has not. I know Tampa Bay is undefeated so far this year, but it's been one hell of a week for our Cannon Fire family. So not only do we appreciate everyone hanging out with us here today, but I mean, honestly, just anyone still kicking with us. It has been a hectic week, not only around, us and people that we know personally, but even the NFL.
Yeah, just geez Louise, tough first week. Just so much tough situations happening. Obviously thoughts and prayers go out to everybody. Like you said, everybody relating to the Cannon Fire podcast. The Damar Hamlin situation, tragic. Absolutely tragic. I feel like the right decision was made on that too, in regarding the game and whatnot. And that obviously creates a logistical mess, but it needed to happen.
Wow, there we go.
And the dogs agree.
They agree. Yeah, I think the right choice was made. As far as Damar Hamlin, though, for anyone not up to speed, though, a lot of encouraging updates from that camp. The breathing tube has been taken out in the hospital. He was able to FaceTime his teammates this morning, kind of address everybody. And I don't know if the report was true, but they said that when he was first waking up and starting to interact with people, the first question he asked is if they won the game. As in, if the Buffalo Bills beat Cincinnati and that game was canceled, it was obviously ruled a no contest. But you want to talk about the ultimate football guy. Hats off to Damar Hamlin, the Chasing M's Foundation, obviously that fundraiser, the way people have just have kind of, gotten behind this young man and really supported and lifted him up in a time like this. It has been refreshing to see the support that he's gotten in just the crazy ass times that we're living through right now.
Sometimes we get it right, as a society or a group of human beings. Sometimes we can come together and really show support. Tom Brady even donated to the toy drive, I believe, that Damar Hamlin was supporting and whatnot. I believe he gave a $10,000 donation. So, it's just a cool thing to see everybody be able to come together. I think what last I saw was up to $6 million was what was raised for it. So just really cool. That just goes to show that situations like that, it is more than just a sport. It is more than just entertainment. Whenever there is tragedy, whenever there is heartbreaking things that do happen, people are able to come together and show support when it is needed. So I think that that's an excellent and a very encouraging thing to see.
Absolutely. And just for the people curious, Evan Wanish will return for our post-game show this week. Sunday, win, lose, or draw after the game against Atlanta. We will be live right here, youtube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast to recap the game and, of course, the regular season as we get ready for the postseason. Let's check in on the live chat really quickly. Our buddy Wishing B says, wishing Vita Vea can take this week off and have a few more weeks to heal. That definitely would be nice, but I think for a big guy like Vita, he's been battling injury all year. So, skipping out on a game like this, in the grand scheme of things, I think is going to do a lot of good for his availability in the postseason. Lobello says, Tom Brady's first year with Tampa Bay, a Super Bowl win, second year division champs, third year so far division champs. Everyone wanting to move on from Tom Brady is out of your mind. You have become too spoiled. And, Shaun had mentioned it earlier, and I know he was just kind of the messenger talking about the media buzz, but I could do a whole hour and a half podcast on why I think if Tom Brady plays another year, it's going to be here in Tampa Bay. But I know that we have also flirted with the idea of if TB12 does end up deciding to retire or just, hit the old dusty trail and go find a new franchise to try and bring to glory, we've flirted with the idea of some potential quarterbacks that could come in here and be the future of this franchise. We already talked about the Kyle Trask perspective of it a little bit earlier, but Sean mentioned it as well. It's a pretty stacked free agent class. And I mean, there's not a ton of playmakers there. There's a lot of high risk, high reward type players. But when you hear of guys like Cooper Rush, who is proven to be capable of winning games for Dallas, Gardner Minshew, who, listen, that's my vote.
That's your guy.
Minshew mania running wild in Tampa Bay is obviously what I want the most. But the other options,
you just want him as your quarterback because that's just basically you if you were an NFL quarterback.
Maybe. I mean,
you'd
I know
be out
he
there
wasn't
wearing the jorts, man.
I know he wasn't balling out last week for Philly because they really didn't have any answers. But the week before that game against Dallas, what was it? Christmas Eve when they were playing in Dallas? I know they ultimately lost that game, but I mean, he was balling. He was balling. Let's see here. Hollow in the chat says, am I wrong for wanting Derek Carr if Tom Brady leaves? At least he would fit the whole pirate theme. Well, there's already, the marketing aspect with the pirate theme coming from the Raiders, but I don't think that relationship in Vegas is going to be mended at this point. I know people were kind of talking about, Josh McDaniels really likes Derek Carr and Devontae Adams. That's the only reason he's Raiders because of Derek Carr. So clearly he's not going to go anywhere. And they just gave him that big ass deal last offseason. But I mean, it's done. Like, he's done in a Raiders uniform. And he has done so much to where they didn't even want him in the facility the last 2 weeks of the regular season. So with that being said, what are your thoughts on Derek Carr? Because honestly, as much as I like Gardner Minshew, I would like a Derek Carr a lot more because he's proven to me, even though he's a little bit more of a high-risk quarterback because of the high volume of interceptions he's had this year, if the Bucs stick with an air raid style of offense, Derek Carr can make all those throws.
Now I want to say this is he does have 14 interceptions, which I believe leads the league this year.
Kind of crazy too, because a couple of years ago we just witnessed 30.
Right. So I mean, but I want to say this is I've seen a lot of Raiders people on Twitter talk about how they're pretty excited to be moving on from Derek Carr, and they're like, yeah, it's about time, Carr, he was the reason the Raiders struggled this year. I don't agree with that. I mean, I just don't. I think that whenever I look at Derek Carr and I look at the response from Raiders people who say, oh, it's about time. Yeah, they do need to move on from Derek Carr. I sit there and think, why? He's still a good quarterback. He's still a very good quarterback, I think. If you give him, and yes, he has Devontae Adams, and I still think he's putting up decent numbers, man.
Devontae Adams broke the Raiders franchise record for receiving yards, and I think he was pretty damn close in receiving touchdowns as well. I mean, he had a really good year on a losing team.
Right. So, I mean, they do have some weapons over there with the Raiders. And I feel like Carr is still a very good quarterback. I would say probably a top 15 quarterback in the league. So when I see, a lot of people from the Raiders say, oh man, it's about time they're ready to move on from Derek Carr. I sit there and think, dude, I'd love this guy in the Bucs if Brady wasn't there. If Brady retires or if Brady, I still think he probably retires, but if he's not around and you have to pick somebody else, go get Derek Carr, man. You can get that guy on a long-term deal potentially. If he's released, even better, and I guess in my opinion, I mean, either way, he can be a guy. How old is he now? 29, 30?
I think he 31. Might be, 31.
He's 31. So you can have him, be your quarterback for 4 years, 5 years, something along those lines. Quarterbacks play around 35, 36 now. And I think that you could get some productive play from him given the weapons that you have around. So that's kind of my thoughts on Derek Carr. I think that in terms of all the guys that would be available, if the Buccaneers needed to pick a guy to be able to come in and compete, you can make a legitimate argument that Carr's the top option. If you look at other guys like a Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm pretty high on a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. Again, it's back to that idea where first off, the guy just wins.
Yeah.
The guy wins, and if you give him enough good weapons, I feel like he is a guy that you can get some productive play out of. But still, I would say Derek Carr, if he's available, hey, got to be the number one option in my opinion, just based off of just the good stats that you've been able to see him put up. I mean, geez, you look at his career stats, 217 passing touchdowns to 99 interceptions and 35,000 passing yards in his career. That's pretty good, man.
217 to 99 picks. And let's not forget, he's probably coming off of his, I think, maybe worst season throwing interceptions. If not
tied. Okay. Last year he had 14.
Oh, so he's been playing bad 2 years in a row. Love to hear that.
Well, look. But even then, like, is 14 interceptions really that bad? Like, in my opinion, not. Like, I don't think it's terrible.
When it leads the NFL in a year like this, where we've seen a lot of bad offensive play, it is kind of bad. But again, context being important. I mentioned it before. 2019, we watched a guy go out there and throw 30. So.
Well, I mean, and look, like Jameis Winston threw 14 interceptions 4 times, or 14 or more 4 times in his career, So, I mean, like, for me, it's kind of like, well, if you can have a guy like that at quarterback and have faith and trust that this guy can be your franchise quarterback, you can deal with a guy like Derek Carr. And I think if he's throwing 14 interceptions a year maximum, that's his most he's ever thrown in a year. I'm not mad about that.
Yeah, obviously some guys could just need a change of scenery. Maybe for Derek Carr, that is the case. Some thoughts in the live chat here about the quarterback discussion. Reznov Nada says Derek Carr won't win anything for Tampa Bay. He's just not that guy. And Jimmy G is too injury prone and not reliable. Hollow actually really likes the idea of Jimmy G. Says, oh yeah, Jimmy G does sound better and way better looking than Derek Carr. Let's see what else. Lobello with a great point here, and this is kind of where I want to pivot the conversation as we talk about the potential future of the quarterback position for Tampa Bay. If Tom Brady does leave, then I would want to get Derek Carr, but if both are available, then easily keep Tom Brady for as long as possible. So I haven't gotten your opinion on this, and I wish I could have asked Sean before he had to go, but Tom Brady people talk a lot about Tom Brady in retirement, but Tom Brady has not talked a lot about retirement. And listen, when he retired the first time, he didn't talk a lot about retirement, but there were quotes that came out where you could kind of start to put the pieces together and maybe see it coming, right? Towards the end of the regular season, even going into the playoffs, he started to talk a lot more about his family, spending time with people who were important with him, making time that he didn't always have before. Like, hindsight's always 2020, but the way that he was talking, you could almost see it coming, right? Well, sure. a couple of clues that we've got so far as Tom Brady and his thoughts on retirement. One of them is that he had reposted something that NFL Films had put up, and it was about his quarterback sneak touchdown against Carolina. And he had mentioned he's been doing it for 23 years and counting, which a lot of people thought was interesting, right? I mean, you're not going to continue to count the years if maybe you don't plan to have a few more. I don't know. And another talking point that was brought up was that on his Let's Go podcast a couple of weeks ago, they straight up asked him the question, have you thought about retirement? Have you thought at all about what your official retirement is going to look like? And his answer was no. It's like the furthest thing from his mind right now. And I think when you're Tom Brady, who has made it clear that, as long as he has the ability to go out there and help his team, he's going to continue to play. As long as he thinks he can play, he's going to go out there and play. And when you've got 3 50-plus yard touchdowns to Mike Evans through the air last week, nobody's making any more comparisons to Tom Brady and Drew Brees and Peyton Manning. You remember a couple of weeks ago, there was some bozo on Twitter who had said something comparing Tom Brady to Peyton Manning his final season. Like, what the fuck, man? Nobody's doing that.
That's not accurate.
That's terrible.
Yeah, that's not accurate.
I mean, obviously, we've had the discussion time and time again. I think if you're looking at Tom Brady as one of the main problems with this Bucs team in 2022, you just haven't been watching close enough. But with all of that being said, I've always been the eternal optimist here on the podcast. But, like, what if he does come back for another year? What if he does come back for 2 or maybe 3 more seasons? And what are your thoughts on that potentially being with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as opposed to other teams? Because like I said, I could go on an hour-long tangent about why he's not going to be a Raider, why he's not going to be a 49er, and why he's going to stay on the East Coast and continue to play in a Tampa Bay uniform. What do you think?
Well, I mean, number one, I still think he retires. Like I could see Tom Brady totally say a thing where it's like, it's farthest thing from my mind. And then the reasoning is like, because I'm focused on the game. I'm focused on the season. And that's understandable. But I still think he retires, all things considered. I mean, the guy is 46 now, and he probably wants to spend some time with his kids. I know I said that last year, but I'm going to keep on saying it until it happens.
45, not 46 till August.
Okay, well, there you go. He's 45. So, if he did stay, I would think probably his first options with the Bucs, not just because of the idea of, I mean, geez, if they fire Byron Leftwich, I guess he'd have to learn a new offensive scheme anyway. But
who's to say he doesn't have some input on
who the offensive coordinator
he wants to bring in? Because at the end of the day, we talked about Todd Bowles moving on from Byron Leftwich in the offseason. Unless the Bucs win the damn Super Bowl, I don't even care.
Even
if they win the Super Bowl, I don't think Byron Leftwich could be justified.
I don't care. He needs to be gone. Like, I know that I'm usually not that blunt about situations like that, but like, dog, I don't care if they go and win the Super Bowl. Like, I'm so over just the play calling and just the inefficiencies. And I know.
Did you see his quote yesterday? Where
dude, it's insufferable.
He had said, and this is the worst part about Byron so far this year, is that I don't think he's had a single press conference in 2022 that didn't come off as incredibly condescending. Like, the way that he talks, you would still think the Bucs were a top offense in the NFL, which is just not the case. But what he said this week in particular took a lot of people by surprise, myself included. He said he feels like, the slander against the Bucs offense has been overblown. When people talk about how they are no longer averaging 30 points per game, he knows that they haven't gotten any better. He knows that they have gotten worse. But it's like it's not that big of a deal to him. And he literally said yesterday, he was up at the podium. He's like, I think people are overreacting about how this offense looks right now. I know we've got a lot of slack this year. And he's like, what? But we're ranked like 12th in the NFL?
In terms of yards.
Well, no, the Bucs are ranked 11th in terms of yards, and they are ranked 24th.
Yep.
In terms of scoring. This was the number 2 statistical offense in the NFL in 2021. And they have just fallen off of a cliff this season. And it's almost like he doesn't even want to acknowledge that.
Well, and then let me point to this too. He said, I think you guys over-exaggerate because we look different. The numbers say we're not that far off. For some reason, everybody wants to throw dirt on the Bucs. That's an exact quote. Greg Auman of Fox Sports said, Bucs offense has 29 touchdowns this year, had 56 at this point last year. So they're not, numbers aren't that close. So I don't understand where that's coming from. Another quote here, when you really listen to people talk about us, it's emotions talking. That's not really people that are watching us get better every week.
Got me smacking my microphone around. I mean,
and then there's obviously that quote that you said. I will say one thing that Byron Leftwich said that I do agree with. We're awful from third down and red zone. It's disappointing. Those two things for us as a team with who we have. Well, yeah, I actually agree with that. So, but then he says that they're not that far off and that the numbers look the same. So like how, but you just said that things aren't that different, but they are, because you said you're awful in the red zone and you're awful on third down. He's contradicting himself there a little bit, in my opinion. What is happening, dude? Just what is happening? I don't know. I'm sad. I'm upset. Pain. I don't care if they win the Super Bowl, man. This homie needs to go be a coach somewhere else.
I agree. You kind of
that may be a hot take. That may be a hot take.
No, you're not the only person on the planet right now who thinks Byron Leftwich should not be in Tampa Bay. And honestly, it bums a lot of people out when you think of just how close the Jaguars were to taking them off of our hands this time a year ago, right?
Yeah.
They were finalizing the deal with Jacksonville. He had a little bit of falling out with the GM. They go another direction. And lucky for the Jags, they're playing for their division in a spot in the postseason Can you believe that? The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to play a football game on Sunday to potentially reach the postseason. Like,
I love Doug Peterson. He's a great head coach.
Doug Peterson obviously working wonders with Trevor Lawrence, making him one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. But let's reel this thing back in. We were talking about Tom Brady, the possibility of him staying in Tampa Bay for another year, another 2 years. I know you said you think he retires. I don't know, man. I don't think he does, but I've obviously been wrong before. Trying to think of one more thing I wanted to talk about here before we wrap this thing up. You know, this offense in general, I don't want to get myself too excited, right? I think this is important, and I don't want to end the show on a negative note because we were talking with Shaun King, who literally just put a bet in for Tampa Bay to win the Super Bowl. And I do think this Bucs team still has the talent to win some games in the postseason, but this offense, I'm not saying last week was a fluke where they scored 30 points, but I'm not ready to buy in yet. All right. The Bucs have gotten my hopes up too many times this season where I've told myself, all right, they're going to turn it around. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get the ball rolling. Tom Brady's going to right the ship, and we're going to get back to, putting up 28, 34, 38, maybe 40 plus points on teams. We're going to do it.
Points.
And they haven't done it. You look at the wins that they have had, the last few wins that they have had. Carolina, 21-10 headed into the fourth quarter of the game. 16-6 headed into the fourth quarter on Christmas Day against Trace fucking McSorley and the Arizona Cardinals. I don't remember the score, but they were down 2 possessions heading into the final 5 minutes of that Monday Night Football game against New Orleans. This offense has not proven to me this year that they can play a full 60 minutes. And I'm going to be looking for that, obviously, Sunday against Atlanta. I think the Bucs are going to be looking for that. Everyone in that locker room knows it. That's why Chris Godwin goes out there and says it. That's why Tom Brady says it. They know they have to put together a full 60 minutes. But if they can't do that on Sunday, I think we have to come to terms with what this offense is right now. And we talked about the stout defense. They obviously deserve the credit. And listen, when you have Tom Brady, you obviously always have a fighting chance, but it's not going to be what it was, when they were dropping a ton of points on teams. So, what are your thoughts and expectations for the offense as we wrap up the regular season and head into the postseason here?
Yeah, obviously last week was insanely encouraging, but like you said, the offense has been so inconsistent on a week-to-week basis that you can't buy fully in to that point of they're back, they're ready to go. They're good to go. You can't necessarily say that because that's what everybody thought after the Munich Germany game. That wasn't accurate.
Outside of the game against Carolina, not to cut you off, I just want to get this point in here. Outside of the game against Carolina, outside of Munich, and outside of week 1, probably the 3 best offensive performances. Week 1 against Dallas was a boring game offensively, right? They ran the ball well, which is why they were able to control the clock and really win that game the way that they did, over 100 yards on the ground. That hasn't happened a lot this year. Gave us some false hope in the first week of the season. And, against the Seahawks in Germany, they were a well-oiled machine, but they weren't a scoring machine. You know what I mean? They hadn't quite turned the corner to maybe bring themselves back to former glory, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, whenever you set your expectations for how are they going to perform in week 18, well, that's going to be a little bit difficult too, because all the starters aren't going to be playing the entire game, in my opinion. So even then, I sit there going into the playoffs thinking, I still don't necessarily know how this offense is going to look 100% against some good defenses. The Bucs have been able to put up some decent numbers, but playoffs are an entirely different beast, man. And it goes for both ways. Obviously, the Buccaneers offense could rebound, or they could falter against some good defenses. So, I don't know. It's just the massive amount of inconsistency throughout this year. The problems that Byron Leftwich has had as offensive coordinator, all jokes aside, he's been very inconsistent. All the bad, inefficient stuff that's been happening this year at the Bucs offense is all going to possibly factor into any, into the playoffs.
The lack of a run game. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it automatically makes this offense one-dimensional when they're not even that good to begin with. So with Leonard Fournette, playoff Lenny, obviously playing through injury, unfortunately. He mentioned that that foot injury that he's kind of had heavily taped up these past couple of weeks. He's been playing through that. That's a pain management thing. He chooses to be out there, but he's not getting the reps. And to be honest, for a running back getting paid $7 million a year, he has been disappointing this season. Rachaad White has been a breath of fresh air, but even though he has been good, he hasn't really moved the needle as far as, the production in the run game. And it hasn't really introduced a lot of folds into this offense that we know can be so much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree 100%, man. I mean, the running game has been inefficient, and just all that stuff, man. I mean, all the stuff that, they keep on saying they want to improve on, it doesn't necessarily happen. So, as I said, expectations for the playoffs and whatnot. I mean, who knows? Who knows what offense is going to show up? And that's kind of the only way I can look at it right now. I can't sit there and say, the offense is back to form, because I've thought that before this year, and like you said, Rhett, been dead wrong the next week. So, who knows? Who knows what type of offense is going to show up? It just depends on how well they're able to execute and how well of a game plan Byron Leftwich is able to call in that game.
Yeah. Building consistency, obviously going to be a big thing for Tampa Bay. Looking to have another great week on the offensive side of the ball against a division opponent in Atlanta. And the Falcons, they have nothing to play for. This is their final game of the season, but teams like this love to play upset. And I know the Bucs, obviously, a win or a lose or a win or a loss here is not going to make much of a difference. But I still think everyone in that locker room is playing to win. You can treat it as a preseason game if you want to, but Tom Brady doesn't want to finish 8-9. He's never had a negative record in his 23 years of playing in the NFL. And I don't think he wants that to change this year. Even though it has been disappointing, he wants to win. Mike Evans, these guys want to win. Chris Godwin, these guys want to win. Really quick, one more check-in on the live chat. Wishing B says they'll only get back to form when Tom has time. If Jensen suddenly comes back and Wirfs is healthy, etc., maybe. And obviously a great point. We have yet to bring it up. But Ryan Jensen ramping up the intensity at practice this week. And from people close to the situation, they say that there is, I don't want to say a good chance, but a better chance than most would think that he could be ready to go 2 weeks from now for the wild card round, a home playoff game for Tampa Bay. Would love to see Big Red come and make his season debut in the postseason. Obviously, this Bucs offensive line needs it. Chris Mail says, hopefully we run the ball creatively, play action passing, and score some points. I think that was a big reason why the passing game last week was able to do as well as it was. I mean, Mike Evans getting a lot of one-on-one coverage against a rookie cornerback is going to do that a lot of the times, but Tom was feeling comfortable in the pocket, and I think that's because they were getting a little bit more creative with the play action pass, and that has led to great things for this offense. Not only just this year, since joining Tampa Bay, Tom Brady on play action passes is literally like better than any other quarterback in the NFL. The stats will prove it. And hopefully they can try and incorporate that into the playbook. Maybe they get a little creative. This time last year when they were playing Carolina in the final game of the regular season, we saw Scotty Miller get a touchdown on an end around. Julio Jones has gotten some end arounds, but maybe you mix up some personnel. Maybe you mix up, bring in something that just hasn't been on film so far this season. Hopefully he can add some folds into this offense. Also, BK Jackson responds to Wishing B, says it was Sean Payton that gave that 4-2 losing record in the playoff stat. They were talking a little bit earlier about, let me see here. I know what he's talking about. I'm going to find it. 6 times with a losing record, teams enter the playoffs, and the losing record teams were 4 wins and 2 losses. So, I mean, for the Bucs, if they finish with a losing record, a stat like that, history proves to be on their side. What were you going to say as we start to wrap things up?
No, I was just agreeing with what you were saying about the point from the chat and whatnot. So that was all.
Perfect. Well, ladies and gentlemen, actually, you know what? Let me get a score prediction from you, James. I'm curious to see how you think this thing plays out on Sunday. I know, putting you on the spot, but you had some time to think about it because after I asked Sean, you had to have known this question was coming.
I did not. 21-17 Bucs win, but with a lot of backups.
Okay. I like it. Bucs win.
Kyle Trask finishes out the game. Everybody rejoices. And yeah, there's a little bit of hope. Hope for Kyle Trask.
I will take Tampa Bay in this one. I think they win and they finish with a positive record in 2022. 24-14. You know what? I like the defense to stand up. Realistically, Atlanta, just like it had been mentioned, they're kind of rolling the dice here with Ritter, a guy who is not proven to bring a lot of juice to this offense. I know they're going to play tough, and they're really going to try and play upset for Tampa Bay, but I think our defense is going to play well. I think Anthony Nelson is going to have a big game. I think they're going to get after him. He's going to be rattled. I think he'll make a few mistakes. I'd like to see, you know what? I'll predict an interception this week. Nothing crazy, not a multi-turnover game for the defense, but I would like to see an interception this week, maybe leading to some points. And I think the Bucs play a clean game all 60 minutes, kind of shades of that game against Seattle, right? Not a lot of mistakes, just a clean game, went out there and got the job done. And I think they handled business. 24-14, the Bucs come out on top. Couple of score predictions in the chat. Edwin Hernandez says 30-17 Bucs. So 2 weeks in a row, putting up 30 points for Tampa Bay, obviously would be the kind of tone you want to set before the postseason on the offensive side of the ball. Mr. Smith said Falcons got that new guy starting, so the defense will be feasting. I agree with those sentiments exactly. But ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for the final regular season episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us live right here on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more great Tampa Bay Buccaneers content, and find the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show, and of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Check out James Hill, his content right here on YouTube at Mr. Bucs Nation. You can also check out his written work and podcast exclusively on bucsnation.com. Also, Shaun King, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback. You can see his jersey in the backdrop over there with James, the special edition black alternates that the Bucs never wore. But damn it, I wish they did, because they looked sharp. I like that combo in Madden still every now and again. Follow Shaun King on Twitter at Real Shaun King. And you can also find him on Instagram at Coach Shaun King. And you can watch him on your television set Monday through Friday on VSiN Primetime Live. He's got you covered on everything betting, whether it's, NHL, NBA, NFL. He's putting bets on everything. We were talking about it last time. I think he had mentioned a NASCAR bet on here before, and I was like, are you kidding me? So make sure you get in touch with him on that and showing some love. Really grateful to have him and his insight on the Cannon Fire Podcast this year. Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But once again, folks, that is the show. Win, lose, or draw, we'll be live right here, youtube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast. I will be joined by Evan Wanish after the game on Sunday. Like 4 o'clock, 3:45, if everything goes according to plan. We should be talking to you guys right around that time. It should be a good one. Looking forward to it, and would love to see the Buccaneers round out a disappointing regular season with a positive record and some positive momentum headed into the playoffs. They made the dance. You just got to see what they can do when they get there. We'll talk to you next time. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, James Hill, and special guest, co-host at this rate. I don't want to undersell him here. Former Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback, Shaun King. Always a pleasure. Thank you guys again. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thanks for listening, and go Bucs.